Hello everyone, a very good morning and welcome to BYJU'S Exam Prep. Welcome to our daily Hindu analysis. Before we begin, we have a very big announcement. As we promised yesterday, from tomorrow, we are going to launch Target Prelims 2023. This time, the much awaited crash course is going to be comprehensive, it's going to be more holistic and bigger. We have divided the crash course into 4 different phases, some of which will be available exclusively on our YouTube channel, and some of the phases will be exclusively available on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app. So all you have to do is to subscribe to our YouTube channel, download the BYJU'S Exam Prep app. In the first phase, that is starting tomorrow, we shall have live Q&A sessions to discuss the strategy that you need to follow in the next 90 days. We have exactly 3 months left for the prelims. We are going to help you prepare and gear up for the upcoming examination, and we'll also take all your questions. So from 1st of March to 6th March on our YouTube channel every day at 8 p.m. Join us live for these strategy sessions. This will lay the foundation for your preparation. We'll discuss how to revise, how best to prepare for the upcoming prelims in the next 90 days. After this, we'll start with phase 2 of the crash course, which will be exclusively on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app. So here we are going to discuss 400 current affairs topics. Topic-based discussion will take place from across subjects. Once we cover these important topics from current affairs of the last 1 year, then we will have a MCQ-based discussion exclusively on our YouTube channel. This is similar to our regular crash course which we had last year as well. So we'll have subject-based MCQs. We'll also be discussing previous year question papers as well. So this will go on from 15th April to 15th May, right before your examination. We'll also be providing few full-length mock tests for your practice exclusively on the BYJU'S Exam Prep app. So this is what we have lined up for this year's Target Prelims 2023. I really hope all of you take the full benefit of this, and trust me, if you're able to attend all these sessions, we can guarantee you that you're going to perform very well in the upcoming prelims. So what is the fee for this crash course? As always, our initiatives are free on YouTube. All you have to do is pay us for these initiatives with your likes and comments. Also, don't forget, subscribe to the YouTube channel and download the app so you get all the updates. Subscribe to our Telegram channel as well so you get all the relevant updates regarding the exact schedule of all these classes. So with this, let's get started with the analysis of today's The Hindu Newspaper by first looking at the editorials and columns that we are going to cover today. We have 3 important editorials and columns lined up, including an article on e-waste management rules, the New START Treaty, and organ on chip. These are 3 very, very important topics. We are going to cover them in detail. Then we shall take a look at a set of prelims topics along with a heads up section. There are some smaller topics in today's newspaper which could be more relevant for your prelims. So let's cover all these articles. Stay with me for the next 1 hour. I can guarantee you that you don't have to go back and read the newspaper. So let's start with the first column that analyzes the e-waste rules that were recently notified by the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change. See, e-waste basically refers to electronic waste. In today's world of digitization and urbanization and population growth, we are all consuming a lot of electronic devices and gadgets, be it television sets, monitors, CPUs, mobile phones, printers, whatnot. We all consume a lot of electronic devices. We all use and operate a number of electronic gadgets on a day-to-day basis. Of course, all these devices, they reach their end of life. They have a shelf life. So when you dispose the electronic items, right, what happens to them after you dispose these items? That is a big question. All right. So electronic waste, the term e-waste, is essentially referring to these electronic devices which are being discarded by the consumers. They are being disposed by the consumers after using them for a certain period of time. So today, urbanization has been going on rapidly. And all over the world, digitization has been widely adopted and there is a rapid growth in population. There is a deep penetration of technology, communication networks today. Almost every other person on the planet will be using multiple electronic devices. So in the last few decades, we have been generating massive quantities of e-waste or electronic waste, and this has become a serious ecological hazard. Dealing with e-waste, managing the e-waste has become a huge challenge. So most countries have a set of rules to manage electronic waste, and in the case of India, the Ministry of Environment, Forest and Climate Change has brought out a set of e-waste management rules. Recently, this has been upgraded, and in November 2022, a new set of e-waste rules were notified by the ministry. They are going to come into force from 1st April 2023. So that is why it becomes very important to understand more about electronic waste. What is the scale of the problem that we are dealing with here? What are the risks, hazards posed by electronic waste? How has India been handling this problem? What rules did we have earlier? What does the new rules talk about? What are the key provisions present in the new rules? Are there any shortcomings? So this entire analysis has to be carried out. As I told you, e-waste or electronic waste is essentially any electronic gadget or device or product which is being disposed by the consumer after using them for a certain period of time. This includes old mobile phones, old printers, audio video devices, television screens, monitors, etc. So once you dispose these items, right, they essentially become part of the waste which is being generated. But this cannot be treated like regular waste because e-waste can be potentially hazardous. E-waste can contain hazardous and harmful substances, including dangerous heavy metals, which can be very toxic to the environment and as well as to human health. Heavy metals like lead, for example, right? If lead leaches into the soil and the water, it can pollute the environment, harm the ecosystem and other organisms, and it could also have a toxic impact on human beings. So many electronic devices, they contain lead, beryllium, cadmium, brominated flame retardants, etc. They're all hazardous substances which pose a serious threat to the environment and human well-being. They even contain a lot of rare earth minerals. They contain a lot of critical and strategic metals and minerals which can be reused. If you recycle e-waste in a scientific way, you can provide for a circular economy, which is the current focus of the global economy. In India and around the world, the focus is on circular economy, creating a circular economy where we promote the 3R principle, that is reuse, recycle and refurbish. The idea is to minimize the wastage of resources. A lot of products, they'll have many components, many spare parts, many ingredients and raw materials which can be recycled and reused in the system. This reduces the stress on the environment and it promotes the idea of sustainable development. So today, the focus is on promoting a circular economy and introducing the 3R principles to promote reuse, recycling and refurbishing. So you need not dispose and just dump and throw the old products. Rather, you can scientifically collect them, segregate them, and then put them through a processing cycle where you can recycle whatever is possible. You can extract the raw ingredients, the materials, whatever can be brought back to the manufacturing process. Rest you can discard in a scientific way by causing minimum damage to the environment and human health. So what you need is scientific management of this waste. This applies for any waste, be it regular urban waste that we generate, right? Be it plastic waste. The same applies for electronic waste as well. But here the concern is a little more serious because of the hazardous nature of some of the substances. So this is where we have to be a little careful in handling e-waste or electronic waste. So consumers or those who are not skilled enough, they cannot handle this waste on their own. This requires expertise. This requires industry level involvement. So that is why we have a set of e-waste rules which places responsibilities on different stakeholders to provide for e-waste management in India. Now this is extremely crucial for India because we have emerged as the third largest e-waste generator in the world. After China and the United States, India has clearly become the top electronic waste generating country in the world. And developing countries find it more challenging to deal with hazardous waste because they may not have the right processes in place to collect, segregate and scientifically process such hazardous waste materials. And quite often developed countries dump their hazardous waste on developing nations like India because they don't want to deal with hazardous waste in their own territories as it could pollute their environment. Quite often, many hazardous waste materials are dumped on developing nations like India to handle the processing of hazardous substances. So keeping all these factors in mind and considering how digitization is going to expand further, how we are going to generate millions of tons of e-waste in the coming years, it's very, very important to address this challenge through a policy, through a well-drafted policy which is effectively enforced. You should also recognize that in India, in developing countries like India, most of the waste processing is handled by the informal, unorganized sector. Almost 90 to 95% of waste processing in India is handled by informal workers who are not skilled, who are not registered legally, who don't have the required skills and protective equipment. So such unscientific processing of waste, the two hazardous waste, can have a serious impact on the environment and as well as on human health. So that is why you need a set of dedicated rules. There should be a policy in place which is strictly enforced. So in India, this is done through the e-waste management rules, which were first brought out in the year 2011 by the Ministry of Environment and Forests. It came into force in 2012 and it introduced a concept called EPR, Extended Producer Responsibility. Now such important concepts which are brought out through policies and laws are very important for your prelims. In one of the exams, UPSC had asked a question, a basic question on what is EPR, in what context is the term Extended Producer Responsibility used. So if you have basic awareness about the e-waste management rules, if you understand what is Extended Producer Responsibility, you would be able to easily answer such questions. So through the e-waste rules of 2011, the ministry introduced Extended Producer Responsibility, which places an obligation on the producer. Just look at the chart here, the infographic here. See, when you purchase a commodity, if you purchase an electronic device, right, the retailer is selling it to the consumer, right? The consumer is using the device. Let's say it's a mobile phone. So the consumer has bought it online or he has gone to a shop and he has bought a mobile phone from a retailer. The consumer uses the phone for 2-3 years. Finally, he decides to buy a new phone. Now he wants to dispose the phone. So this is the end of life of this product. The product is being discarded right now after being used. Now what happens when a consumer is discarding the product? This is where e-waste management comes in. There should be a well-established process to collect that phone, scientifically collect the phone, segregate all the components and push it towards scientific processing. This responsibility has been placed on the producer. The producers who manufactured the devices, they are liable, they are responsible for the entire life cycle of the product. This is what you mean by the concept of EPR. The companies which produce the phone, the producer is responsible for the life cycle, for the end of life processing of the device. By placing this responsibility on the producer, you are holding the companies accountable. Plus, you are providing for an established process, a scientific process through which e-waste can be collected, segregated, handled and processed. Alright? And more importantly, whatever is recovered from the recycling and reprocessing, it can be channeled back towards the production and manufacturing of new phones and new devices. So that way the producer benefits as well. Instead of procuring new raw materials to make new phones, by establishing this chain of recycling, they can create a value addition. They can recycle the products, the raw materials, especially critical strategic minerals and metals, and they can reuse it in the manufacturing process to produce the newer phones. This will reduce their operational cost. It will reduce the need for procuring more raw materials, and thus it reduces the stress on the environment. So this is the whole concept of a circular economy. So India's e-waste management rules introduced the concept of EPR in 2011 itself. Extended producer responsibility was introduced, where producers are held responsible for the safe disposal of e-waste which are discarded by the consumers. These rules were amended and updated in 2016. There were few shortcomings, also a lot of technological changes had happened. So e-waste rules were amended in 2016, it was again amended in 2018. Through these recent amendments, the concept of authorization of the refurbishers was introduced. The concept of product stewardship was added, and producer responsibility organizations were introduced with a legal backing. All right. These were some important changes that were done in 2016 and 2018 to the e-waste management rules of India. Along with the extended producer responsibility concept, the dealers who come in between the producer and the recycler, they had to be authorized. Is that clear? Now producers who are creating the back-end logistics to collect and segregate and process all the waste items, they have to enter into contract with third-party dealers. Maybe each company can sign a contract, or the industry can form an association, an organization, right? And they can enter into these contracts with dealers. These third-party private dealers, they will take up the task of collecting the e-waste, segregating it, pushing it towards scientific formal recycling. So they serve as a link. The dealers in between, they serve as a link between producers and recyclers, and they had to be authorized. They had to be legally authorized. There should be a contract between the producer and the dealer. And the producers should establish a PRO, a producer responsibility organization. The PRO will look after the arrangements between the dealers and the recyclers, so that there is enough transparency and accountability in the system, so that there is a scientific way in which the waste items are being collected, moved and processed, and the dealers can be held accountable, the recyclers can be held accountable as well. So this was a hierarchical system that was created. At the top of the value chain, it is the producers who have the final responsibility under the extended producer responsibility concept. They have to enter into contracts with various dealers, third-party organizations, right? The industry has to form PROs, or producer responsibility organizations, to look after these contracts, and the dealers eventually channel all the e-waste towards the recyclers, who will break down the products and they will recycle and reprocess all the items, including the hazardous substances. This is the chain of e-waste management that was created through the e-waste management rules. Now, this important policy has been updated again in 2022. Last year in November, a new set of e-waste rules has been notified, and you need to know the key provisions, the new provisions which have been added, and what are the shortcomings. See, one of the new provisions which has been introduced is the registration of the stakeholders. I was just telling you that in the previous set of rules, the stakeholders had to be only authorized. They only had to get an authorization done from the Central Pollution Control Board, which further coordinates with the producers, that is the producer responsibility organizations. The dealers in between, right, they only had to get an authorization. Even the recyclers, they were not being registered formally. They didn't have all the legal obligations on them. There was no transparency in the entire process. Because authorization alone is not enough. They had to be registered. They had to legally register, provide all the details, take up all the legal obligations. This was missing in the previous rules. So the new rules is an improvement, because it is providing for the mandatory registration of all the stakeholders. All the dealers, recyclers who are all involved in between, they all have to get registered mandatorily with the concerned authorities in order to introduce more transparency and accountability in the recycling process. In the previous rules, the shortcoming was the refurbishers, the repair shops, the dealers, they were not being registered, they were only being authorized. The producer responsibility organizations, they would only get an authorization from the authorities, from the Central Pollution Control Board. This alone is not enough to enforce all the provisions on the middlemen. Their registration has to be made mandatory. That is what the new rules is doing. It makes it mandatory for all the stakeholders involved in e-waste handling to get registered with the Pollution Control Board. This has been made mandatory right now. Next, to provide for more accountability, to track the whole process of collection of waste, segregation and handling of waste, digitized system is being introduced. A digital portal is being created under the new rules, and the whole process will be tracked through this digital portal. In fact, digital certificates will be given out to the recyclers, certifying that they have processed and handled this quantity of electronic waste, what is the recovery of items, what is the extent of items which has been disposed and incarcerated. All of that would be mentioned and specified in these digital certificates, so that it adds more credibility to the system. It will bring more accountability and transparency. It will make it easier to track the whole process and make it more formal in nature. It will help in formalization of the e-waste management industry. So digitization is being promoted from start to end, from collection of the devices to the final processing and recovery. In the entire process, digital records will be maintained. A digital portal is being created for this purpose, and the recyclers will be issued digital certificates to officially certify that this is the amount of waste that they have handled. This brings in more accountability and transparency. So this is another positive point. It's a appreciable provision of the new set of e-waste management rules. However, according to the writer of the column, there are few shortcomings as well. The first shortcoming is that the policy is not specifying recovery efficiency. So when you're recycling a product, there are two stages in any recycling. Especially when you're handling electronic waste, there are two stages involved. One is component recovery, where you're recovering the components which can be reused in the industry, especially rare earth metals, precious minerals. Sometimes gold, silver is also used in electronic devices. So such precious metals, elements are extracted and these components are recovered, right? This is one type of recovery which is happening in waste management. Second is disposing the residue, especially the hazardous residue. Disposing the hazardous residue in a safe scientific manner. These are the two types of recoveries that happen, the two stages involved in e-waste management. Now the policy talks about these two steps. It talks about component recovery and residue disposal, but it does not mention the specifics. The specifics are missing. It does not mention what percentage of a device has to be recovered, what percentage has to be pushed towards safe disposal. There is no way to track the whole process. There is no periodic audit, no periodic tracking or reporting. Essentially, there is no review of how it is being implemented. There are no set standards. No specific standards have been laid out. So this could undermine the policy. This could become one of the shortcomings because it could affect the recovery efficiency. We don't know what extent of components are being recovered. There should be a threshold prescribed by the policy itself that in this electronic gadget, 20-30% of the components have to be recovered. These hazardous substances have to be carefully disposed scientifically. The whole process has to be clearly mentioned. There should be an audit or review to check whether this is being implemented on the ground. These specifics are missing. The details are missing. It only addresses the different stages of recycling, but it does not specifically mention the targets, the thresholds, the review mechanism. That is missing. And this affects recovery efficiency. So that is a key shortcoming. Next, the PROs which were playing an important role before have been removed entirely. the producer responsibility organizations, they were acting as an intermediary between the producer and the formal recyclers. If these are the companies which are producing the devices, between them and recyclers, we have the dealers who collect and segregate all the e-waste. So between producers and recyclers, you also have the PROs, as I mentioned earlier, who facilitate all these contracts. The producer companies would have come together to form an organization, all the manufacturing companies. These organizations called PROs, they act as an intermediary. They negotiate between producers and dealers, between producers and recyclers. They were adding another element of accountability in the system. They were helping in keeping a check on the dealers and recyclers, checking whether actual recycling is taking place, whether hazardous material is being scientifically disposed. Right? So PROs were playing an important role according to the writer. Now this institution has been entirely removed. In the new rules, PROs have been done away with. So going forward, producers are expected to deal directly with the dealers and recyclers, and this could be a shortcoming. This could affect accountability in the whole system, because PROs were playing that important role in between. They were helping in enforce that accountability on the third parties, the dealers and the recyclers. So according to the writer, this is another major shortcoming. Next, another shortcoming is that the informal sector has not been recognized again. I told you earlier, most of the waste in India is handled and processed by the informal sector, by rag pickers, informal, illegal recycling factories which are not even registered. Due to the illegal nature of the informal sector, the policy has left out the informal sector. However, this could become a critical flaw, because this was an opportunity to formalize the informal sector, to create an incentive for the informal industries to come together and take part in e-waste management. Because the fact is, the reality is that on the ground, 95% of your electronic waste is being handled and processed by informal industries. So by excluding them, the policy is leaving out the biggest component of the e-waste management in India. This way, you could have formalized the informal sector, given them better revenue opportunities, given them legal recognition as well, thereby secure livelihoods as well in the informal sector. It could be good for economic growth. You could create more jobs. You could formalize this whole sector by using such policies. But the government has missed the opportunity. It is not recognizing the informal sector. Now this not only affects the efficiency of e-waste handling and management in India, it also we lose out on the opportunity to formalize the informal waste management sector. This is another key shortcoming. And finally, it does not address the lack of consumer awareness. See, most of us, the consumers, we don't even know that there is a e-waste management system present on the back end. For example, we don't know how to dispose our electronic devices. I'm sure majority of us, we just simply go and sell off our devices to the next available buyer. We don't think what will happen to the device next. Many old devices are simply thrown. They're disposed in garbage. They end up in landfills, in urban landfills, which leads to very serious hazardous consequences to the environment. That's because there is no awareness. We don't know where to dispose these items. Right? Take batteries, for example. We don't know how to dispose batteries. We mix it with regular waste and give it off to our municipal authorities. There is a set process to handle e-waste, and the companies, the producers, the government, they have to spread this awareness. The producers and the government together, they have to create the right channels. Right? For example, the producers who have the extended responsibility, they simply set up a collection center, maybe one collection center in an entire city. Or they'll ask the consumers to come to their head office and hand over the devices. Now, nobody is going to do that. Right? No one will put that extra effort to go all the way to a faraway center and hand over the devices. There should be a better incentive model. Right? There should be a decentralized collection. There should be more awareness as to where you can dispose these items, to whom you can hand this over. And there should be an incentive. You should be paid some money in return, so that becomes an incentive, because eventually this is not a waste item. A lot of components will be recovered from it, which adds value back into the manufacturing chain. So this process is missing. The consumer awareness is missing, and this is where the policy is also failing. The government and producers, they have a responsibility here to spread greater awareness. Without that, e-waste management rules will never be efficiently implemented, right? So these are the basic points that you need to be aware of. The positive points and the criticism against the policy. You can always expect a mains question on this. You can even expect a prelims question on e-waste management. Now let's move on to the next article from International Relations. The Hindu carries a detailed article on the New START Treaty. This important topic is in news because recently Russia has announced that it is unilaterally suspending its involvement with the New START Treaty. This is a major arms reduction treaty. It's a nuclear arms reduction treaty between Russia and the United States. And last week, Russian President Putin has announced that Russia is unilaterally suspending the New START Treaty. So we need to understand what is this treaty all about, what is its purpose, what's the history behind this treaty. We should also understand what is going to be the consequences. What are the consequences of Russia suspending the New START Treaty? Because there are concerns that this could increase the tensions between Russia and US, Russia and the Western countries. There are concerns of a new global arms race getting triggered between the major powers, especially in the field of nuclear weapons and strategic weapons. So let's examine this topic in slight detail. See, since the Second World War ended, the Cold War broke out from 1950s, late 1940s, early 1950s itself. The Cold War rivalry broke out between US and Soviet Union, the two major superpowers at that point of time. Right? After the World War ended, the world got divided between these two power blocks. The US and the West, they were leading the democratic capitalist power bloc, and the Soviet Union, on the other hand, was leading the Eastern bloc that represented communism and socialism. So intense rivalry and tension started between the Western and Eastern powers, and US and Soviet Union became arch rivals of each other. Right? They started engaging in covert wars against each other, targeting each other in various countries, exerting their influence around the world, right? Toppling governments to install pro or friendly regimes which would favor their respective countries. So this is called as the phase of the Cold War from 1950s to 1991. Throughout this period, both the superpowers, they started building a massive stockpile of nuclear weapons. Just look at the graph here, you can understand the number of nuclear warheads that they started accumulating, that they started building, and the threat it poses to the very safety and the very survival of the world. At one point, US and Soviet Union combined together, they had more than 80,000 nuclear warheads. That is the extent of arms race that got triggered between these two superpowers. In fact, during the Cold War, the tensions were so high between the two sides that they came very close on a few instances to exchanging nuclear weapons, to getting into a nuclear war with each other. For example, the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962. The Soviet Union had started mobilizing nuclear warheads and delivery systems to Cuba, which is located just off the coast of Florida, right next to the United States. So the US saw this as a major threat. It was looking to retaliate and impose a blockade as well on the Soviet shipments that were coming in. And if the crisis had escalated, it could have potentially led to a full-blown conflict between two nuclear armed rivals. At that point, they were possessing around 30,000 nuclear warheads between them. This stockpile kept increasing through the 1970s, 1980s. You can see the curve. Both US and Soviet Union, they rapidly expanded their nuclear arsenal to establish deterrence against the other. Alright? So this again increased the risk of a accidental or a miscalculated nuclear exchange, and the world couldn't afford any such crisis. So to prevent a possible nuclear war, to prevent any accidents, miscalculations, to build more trust between the two sides, they started negotiating with each other for an arms reduction treaty. This led to the signing of the SALT I and SALT II arrangements in 1970s. Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. SALT stands for Strategic Arms Limitation Talks. 2 rounds of talks were held, 2 agreements were signed to limit the nuclear stockpile and bring down their nuclear warheads and delivery systems. This was the first set of arms reduction treaties that was signed between US and Soviet Union. Later, these were suspended. Then we had the INF Treaty, signed in 1987. The Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, which specifically targeted the short range and medium range ballistic missiles which could deliver nuclear weapons. This basically restricted and prohibited both the sides from stationing these intermediate range nuclear delivery systems closer to each other. For example, US would be prohibited from stationing short range ballistic missiles in Eastern Europe. Similarly, Soviet Union, later Russia, would be prohibited from stationing these short and medium range missiles closer to the US. So the whole idea was to build that confidence that the other side will not launch nuclear attacks on us. The whole idea was to build the trust that was needed to prevent any accidents, any miscalculations. So INF Treaty was signed, and this treaty was in place for almost 30 years. Recently in 2019, the US quit the INF Treaty, and even Russia followed the same. Because by 2019, tensions had started increasing between US and Russia. Then Donald Trump, the then president of the US, believed that because of the INF Treaty, US was not able to expand its short and medium range nuclear arsenal. This was allowing China to rapidly expand its nuclear arsenal, particularly in the South China Sea. So since US is in direct competition with China, it's in a indirect conflict in South China Sea, the US said China is not part of INF Treaty. So because of the INF Treaty with Russia, US has limited its nuclear arsenal, which is giving an advantage to China, which is the current emerging superpower. So to compete with China and to keep the American nuclear arsenal up to date, to match up to Chinese nuclear arsenal, Donald Trump decided to withdraw from INF, and US quit the INF Treaty. Russia also followed the same, given that high tensions were present between US and Russia, and the INF Treaty has come to an end. This has already triggered a new arms race with US on one side, Russia on one side, and China on the other side. So the only treaty which was in place right now for arms reduction between US and Russia was the START Treaty. START stands for Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. This was a replacement to the SALT Treaty that was signed earlier in 1970s. The SALT Treaty had come to an end. It was not entirely successful. The previous SALT treaties of 1970s, it achieved only a limited reduction in the nuclear arsenal of both the countries. But INF Treaty was quite successful. So now that SALT treaties had ended by 1980s, 1990s, a new treaty was needed, and hence START 1 was signed in 1991. It came into effect in 1992. It gave very strict targets for both the sides to reduce their nuclear warheads and their ballistic missiles. This was followed by START 2 treaty with a stricter target, and these treaties lapsed in the year 2009. START 1 and 2, they achieved some success in reducing the nuclear stockpile of both the countries. By 2009, their number of warheads had been drastically brought down. At one point during the Cold War, they each had 35 to 40,000 nuclear warheads. Now, because of START 1 and 2, which was implemented between 1992 and 2009, the nuclear stockpile in the arsenal has been reduced and it has been brought down, and today they hardly possess around 5,000 to 7,000 nuclear warheads and launch vehicles between them. Alright? So as START lapsed in 2009, the new START was worked out. The new START treaty was worked out in 2010. It was signed between then US President Barack Obama and Dmitry Medvedev, the then Russian Prime Minister. It came into force in 2011 and placed stricter targets on the nuclear arsenal of both the countries. Prior to this, in 2002, the SALT treaty also had been signed, the Strategic Offensive Reduction Treaty, which was also focusing on reducing the strategic offensive weapons of both the sides. So all the older treaties were lapsing in 2009. The START 1 and 2 had come to an end, they had lapsed. SALT treaty signed in 2002, which came into effect in 2003, also had lapsed. So that is why a new treaty was needed, which was signed in the year 2010. So START basically stands for Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty. signed in 2010 and came into force in 2011. This treaty was recently extended for 5 years after Joe Biden became the president. In 2021, the treaty was lapsing. The treaty was for a 10-year period. It was implemented from 2011 to 2021. The treaty was lapsing. So to provide for stability between the two sides, the treaty was extended for 5 more years until 2026. But now Russia has unilaterally suspended its involvement with the treaty. If you look at this treaty, it was a vital policy, it was a vital commitment from both the sides to limit an arms race, to prevent a nuclear war between the two sides. It restricted both the sides to 1,550 strategic nuclear warheads. From a high of 35 to 40,000 warheads, their stockpile was being brought down to just around 1,550 warheads with more than 700 long-range missiles and bombers. That is a clear-cut commitment, a target for both the sides. It also limits each country to 800 deployed and non-deployed launchers and delivery vehicles. They can't have more launch vehicles than this. And it provides for a review from the other country. They can carry out 18 short notice on-site inspections of nuclear facilities and bases of the other country. They will give a short notice of 32 hours. Now US, if it wants to check whether Russia is following the treaty, it will give a 32-hour notice saying we are sending a team to visit these nuclear facilities, give us access to see whether you are following the treaty. Similarly, Russia will get the same opportunity. In a year, they will have 18 such short visits available. Each side can conduct 18 short visits. They'll give a 32-hour notice so that they can't manipulate anything on the ground, and they'll send a team immediately to check whether the other side is following the terms of the treaty. They'll conduct an inspection of key nuclear bases and facilities to see whether the terms are being followed by the other side. So all these provisions, including a review, was provided for. That is why the New START Treaty was very, very important to stabilize the relations between US and Russia. Under this agreement, they had even agreed to exchange data periodically regarding their nuclear arsenal, regarding the nuclear bases, the bombers, the new technologies that they are planning. Right? They have to exchange some data, inform each other if they are planning a future nuclear test. Since many years, both have put a moratorium, they have halted nuclear testing. But if they were to conduct a nuclear test, if they were to develop a new nuclear base, or if they were to build a new test site, or deploy more launch vehicles, delivery systems, they have to inform the other side. This is mandatory. All right? They will notify each other before they change their stockpile status. If they were increasing or decreasing their stockpile, they are obligated to inform the other side. So this treaty gave them enough time frame to reduce the stockpile and establish more stability in the relationship. It gave a 7-year window to reduce their stockpile of warheads, missiles, submarines, strategic bombers, etc. All these are the delivery platforms of both the countries to launch nuclear weapons. So with the strict targets, they were given a 7-year deadline to achieve the target. In fact, by 2018, this reduction was even achieved. The initial set of target was even achieved by both US and Russia. It was verified through their inspections, through their short visit inspections. But in the last 4-5 years, the treaty had taken a hit. Because by 2018, Russia-US tensions had gone up. Because Russia had annexed Crimea by 2014. Russia was sponsoring insurgency in Ukraine. Russia was directly responsible for the complete destabilization of Ukraine from 2014 itself. Right? It annexed Crimea. It sponsored insurgency. So as a result, Western countries had already brought some sanctions against Russia. They had thrown Russia out of the G8, and tensions had already increased between the two sides. Then the pandemic broke out. So during the pandemic, there were no inspections. No travel was allowed, so no inspections took place. And then the Russia-Ukraine war started last year. Since then, US-Russia relations have broken down. Both sides are not cooperating with each other. Both are alleging that the other side is not following the terms of the treaty. So because of this breakdown, because of the constant tensions in the relationship, now Russia has decided to suspend its continued participation in the treaty. While announcing this, Russian President Putin stated that the Western countries are trying to destroy Russia. He pointed out that NATO countries and the US, they have provided advanced drones to Ukraine. which is using the drones to target the nuclear facilities of Russia. Now, this is a threat to the nuclear arsenal of Russia. So, the US and the Western countries are indirectly trying to target Russia's nuclear arsenal by taking the help of Ukraine, by using the war as an excuse. This is the allegation, the accusation that Putin brought up. Putin has stated that recently there have been incidents where Russian nuclear bases have been targeted by Ukraine. Ukraine apparently has used kamikaze drones, the suicide drones, which are used to blow up strategic facilities. They fly into strategic installations and blow up, thus destroying the facility. NATO countries, including US, have provided these advanced drones to Ukraine, and reportedly, according to Russia, Ukraine has used them to target Russia's air bases that hold nuclear bombers. So Russia sees this as an existential threat to its nuclear stockpile. Russia fears that US is using the war as an opportunity, using Ukraine to target the nuclear arsenal and stockpile of Russia, to destroy the nuclear bases and strategic bombers of Russia. On these allegations and grounds, Russia has suspended its participation with the treaty. The other argument brought up by Russia is that Britain and France, which are also NATO allies, they have no such commitment. They are not part of any such arms reduction treaty. Britain and France are nuclear powers as well. Please don't forget that. They are very much part of the Western world. They are aligned with US and NATO. So Russia has a concern that what about the nuclear arsenal of Britain and France, which is also aimed at Russia? If Russia is reducing the stockpile and only US has the obligation, how about Britain and France? This is the question raised by Russian President Putin. He has asked, what about Britain and France, which are allies of US, which are NATO members, which are involved in the Ukraine war? They're supplying weapons to Ukraine, right? So clearly the Ukraine war is involved in this. There is an angle here. So Russia has questioned, what about Britain and France? They are not complying with any arms reduction treaties. All their arsenal is targeted at Russia, and Russia sees this as an existential threat. So on these grounds, Putin has pulled Russia out. Russia has suspended its participation in the treaty. So what is going to be the impact? Many experts feel this will have no impact as such. It will not trigger an arms race according to experts, because Russia has not withdrawn from the treaty. Please understand the difference. It has not quit the treaty entirely. It has only suspended the operation of the treaty for the time being. It will only not report to the US. It will not allow US visits to take place. It's only suspended its participation. It has not withdrawn. It has not quit. So this is mostly a symbolic message from Russia that Russia is going to escalate nuclear tensions if Western countries and US continue supporting Ukraine in the war. See, of late, Western countries and US, they have started supplying advanced weapons to Ukraine. Ukraine has been resisting the Russian invasion. So Russia might be sending out a message, a threat, that if you don't stop supporting Ukraine, we will further exploit the nuclear tensions. We will step up the nuclear tensions. And that is the message that Russia could be sending out. So in reality, there may not be any arms race that will get triggered. US will not rush to produce more nuclear weapons. Neither Russia will do the same. Neither Russia will rush to produce more nuclear weapons. Alright? This could be a symbolic move according to several experts. But however, there is a concern. This has the potential to trigger a global arms race. Not just between US and Russia, because there are other powers involved in this equation. You have to keep in mind the nuclear powers of the world, like China, Pakistan, Iran, Israel, India, and the others. Amongst this, you have rogue nuclear states like Pakistan, North Korea, and Iran. Right? They don't follow any international obligations. Pakistan is accused of deliberately promoting nuclear proliferation, the leakage and spread of nuclear technology. North Korea has quit the non-proliferation treaty, has been developing and testing nuclear weapons illegally. Same with Iran. Iran is going against international law to develop nuclear weapons. So, motivated by the breakdown of this arms reduction treaty, China could start rapidly expanding its arsenal. In fact, China is already doing this to get up to its competition with the US. China is already involved in an arms race with the US. So the breakdown of this treaty could trigger China, the next leading superpower, to start an arms race where US would be pushed to produce more arms that will push Russia, India, Pakistan as well to scale up their nuclear arms production. Because if China starts increasing its nuclear arsenal, obviously India will feel threatened. Right? If India starts producing more, Pakistan will feel threatened. Pakistan will also accelerate its program. If the US tries to counter China, Russia will feel threatened. Russia will also accelerate its nuclear arms production. So that is the fear. It could trigger a cycle of arms race. A global arms race could potentially get triggered. That is the concern being raised by the article. All right? It's a very, very important topic in international relations, both for your mains and prelims. Next, we have a small topic but a very important topic on page number 9. It's related to science and technology. It's called organ on a chip. According to me, this topic is very important for your prelims. Most likely there can be a question on this topic. Please make a note of this. What is organ on chip? You need to understand this. See, today, with regard to drug development, drug testing and pharmaceuticals and biotechnology, there are a lot of advances that have happened in the industry. All right? And one such major advancement is the development of organ chips or organ on a chip. It's essentially a small device. It's an electronic smart device which contains human cells. And these cells have the ability to mimic the functioning of human organs. These synthetically produced human cells, which are placed on a chip, on an electronic chip which can record data, right? This chip functions almost like a human organ, like a lung, a human lung or a human liver or a human kidney. You can create human cells on a chip which will mimic all the actions of an organ, including blood flow, the breathing movements, the process of respiration, all the cell activities, etc. They can be replicated on a chip. Now these synthetically produced organs, right, which is organ on chip, they are widely used in testing drugs. It's a new emerging technology. This has been recently approved for drug testing by the US FDA. The Food and Drug Administration of the US has brought out the Modernization Act 2.0, and it has recognized that organ chips can be used for drug testing. So going forward, research and development will be scaled up in the field of organ chips around the world. Even in India, organ chips are being developed by various research institutions and biotech firms. Institutions like IITs, for example, IIT Bombay is working on one such project. There are various biotech companies, pharma companies in India which are carrying out cutting-edge research in the field of organ on chip. Now, these chips are very, very valuable in drug testing. Because see, when a new drug has to be developed, there is a very long process involved. It's a very cumbersome process, very expensive and time consuming. Now to treat a disease, let's say researchers identify a set of chemical compounds which can treat a particular disease. Now how do they test the efficacy? How do they test whether this is safe for humans? Right? They start with a basic lab test. They will test the chemical compound on synthetic cells grown in a petri dish in a lab. This is one way of carrying out the initial test, where in a petri dish, in a lab, they use the chemical compound on synthetically generated cells. But this data is not enough. This is pre-clinical testing. This pre-clinical test, it's not sufficient enough to understand the efficacy of a chemical compound. So that is when we rely on animal testing. In the pre-clinical trials, animal testing is preferred. So the chemical compounds which have been shortlisted by researchers is tested on mice, rats, hamsters, guinea pigs or even pigs before we scale up to human trials. Because before starting human trials, you need to establish that these drugs are safe, they are not toxic. You should establish the non-toxicity of these chemical compounds. This itself takes a very, very long process. It will take months and years. It will take millions of dollars in investment for the pharma companies. And even after that, the problem with animal testing is that they are not entirely accurate. It is still a trial and error. Sometimes the chemical compound might be right for treating a human disease, to repair a human organ which has been damaged. But unfortunately, it can never reach human trials because it will get rejected in animal trials. because animal organs function differently, right? Even though there are certain similarities, you can extrapolate the data, still it is not the same as human testing, right? So animal testing may not be accurate in all the cases. As a result, you will lose out on many valuable drugs which can actually work for humans. It may not work for animals. For animals, it might become toxic or there might be side effects. But based on this, if you're rejecting the drugs, if you're not allowing them to progress to human trials, then you're losing out on potential life-saving drugs. So there is a shortcoming with the current method of drug testing, right? The time, the money involved, plus the accuracy. All these issues can be addressed through organ on a chip, because this is a chip that mimics the functions of a human organ. It was first developed by Donald Ingber, a researcher, bioengineering scientist at the Harvard University. It was first developed in 2010. This was the first human organ on a chip model. This has been widely adopted around the world. Today you have human organ mimicking chips for bone marrow, for kidney, lungs, gut, for vagina, for various human organs. There are chips available. There are cells which are created, placed on this chip. It's a smart chip which collects the data as well. It can mimic the human environmental conditions, including blood flow, breathing, respiration, etc. So testing drugs on these chips is more efficient, as it is very, very close to the functioning of a human organ. Is that clear? They have very high sensitivity and specificity. So that is why the test results will be more accurate, thereby helping in the development of new drugs which can treat many life-threatening diseases. Tomorrow, you will witness the development of human on chip as well. This is the next emerging technology, the future. Organ on chip is not enough. Organ on chip is still isolated, because just by testing a drug on a chip which mimics the functions of a liver, you can't understand its impact on other organs like kidney, the heart, and the respiratory system, etc. Right? Because these organ on chips are still isolated systems. But human body does not function like that. All our organs are interconnected. It's a very complex interconnection. So to understand how a drug will behave on a human, you need human on chip. And this is what currently researchers are developing. They are developing a lab-made chip which will contain different organ cells that can mimic the functioning of different organs with the interconnections, the complex interconnections. That will help researchers better understand how a drug will react on a human being. Right? This is the future of drug development. That is why it's a very, very important topic. All right? Now, let's come to the last part of today's discussion, Prelims Bytes. We'll take a look at few important prelims topics. We'll have a brief discussion on them, as these are smaller topics. Look at this article from page number 11 related to Indian polity. The Election Commission has asked Twitter to take down a video in which the Deputy Chief Minister of Meghalaya was asking for votes. Now, why has the Election Commission done this? See, Meghalaya, Nagaland, they went for elections yesterday. I hope you know that, right? It's been widely reported across newspapers. So, as Meghalaya was headed towards elections, when the model code of conduct was in place, in the 48-hour period before elections, according to the model code of conduct and according to section 126 of the Representation of People Act, no party or no candidate can conduct campaigning on television or any other broadcasting platform in the last 48 hours of the election. This is prohibited by law. All right? See, model code of conduct has no statutory backing. It has no legal backing of its own. It's a regulatory policy the Election Commission has brought out to provide for free and fair elections, to ensure all parties, candidates abide by certain model code of conduct. But within the Representation of People Act, the RPA, that provides for the conduct of elections in India, you have section 126. Under this section, public meetings before 48 hours before the election is prohibited. Any sort of campaign, no person shall convene or hold any public meeting or rallies. No election related material will be broadcast on television or any other similar apparatus as recognized under the Cinematograph Act. Any such propagation of election campaign material is prohibited under the Representation of People Act under section 126. This is the provision that the Deputy Chief Minister of Meghalaya had breached. 48 hours before the election, the Deputy Chief Minister uploaded a video on Twitter, on his Twitter profile, asking for votes for his party. And this is not allowed according to section 126 of RPA. By citing this provision, Election Commission has ordered Twitter to take down this video immediately because it's a violation, it's a breach of the electoral norms. So you should know what is section 126 of RPA. Could be very important for prelims. Next, very important, very interesting article on page number 12. This is related to history and art and culture. Now, if you look at the prelims papers of last few years, you will notice that a lot of prelims questions from art and culture and history are being asked from current affairs, historical places, any artifact, any cultural site which is in news could become a question, a history question in your prelims, which is actually inspired by current affairs. So such topics are very, very important. Just a few days back, we spoke about Bhimbetka, right? We spoke about the Kiladi civilization site. All these historical facts which are in news are very, very important. Similarly, there is a very important development today coming from Odisha. The Archaeological Survey of India has discovered a 1,300-year-old Buddhist stupa in the Jajpur district of Odisha. See, this belt of Odisha near Cuttack, which connects with Andhra Pradesh, coastal Andhra Pradesh, this whole belt is popular for mining. There are a lot of resources present here and there is a lot of mining activity that takes place. Especially a stone called Condolite stones are mined here. I'll explain why Condolite stones are important. So Condolite stone mining is very popular. It's a major business here between Cuttack and Visakhapatnam. This whole belt of Eastern Ghats from Odisha to Andhra Pradesh, this whole belt between Eastern Ghats and coastal India, the east coast of India, there are a lot of mines present, especially in Odisha. There are mines which are extracting the Condolite stones. While this mining was taking place, the mining company came across certain historical artifacts. Later, the Archaeological Survey of India was called in to further examine the findings, and they have discovered that it is a part of a 1,300-year-old Buddhist stupa. Because this region where such active mining is going on, it is the region of one of the most important Buddhist sites in India. In Odisha, there are a number of important Buddhist sites that stretches towards the Andhra Telangana region, in that belt, right? Which stretches across the Jagannath Puri temple as well. The whole stretch has a number of Buddhist sites, and no wonder an artifact of a Buddhist stupa has been found here. So further excavations will go on right now. The mining has been stopped where this artifact was found, and further delicate excavations will be done by the Archaeological Survey to completely extract the ruins of this Buddhist stupa. So this is invaluable cultural heritage of India. So in this context, you should understand the cultural significance of this site, which is Lalitagiri. The Lalitagiri Buddhist complex, the Lalitagiri Buddhist site, is a major Buddhist site in Odisha. In fact, it is part of the popular Diamond Triangle. There are three major Buddhist sites in Odisha: Ratnagiri, Udaygiri and Lalitgiri. You can see them in the images here. There are many Buddhist stupas, monasteries, Buddha statues, relics that have been discovered in these three places. So this is popularly called the Diamond Triangle of Odisha. And Lalitagiri is one of the major Buddhist sites. This is where the discovery has been made. The Jajpur district, where the mine is located, falls in the Lalitagiri Buddhist site complex. So the initial assessment is that the Buddhist stupa which has been discovered here could belong to the same archaeological complex. So here we have discovered many other stupas, many other Buddha statues and images, viharas or monasteries, right? Many significant finds have come up from this site already. It's part of the Diamond Triangle. So that is why this discovery is important. So you should know where Lalitagiri is located. What is the Diamond Triangle of Odisha? It is believed that Tantric Buddhism was practiced here during the ancient times, and there exists a strong cultural link between all these Buddhist cultural sites. There is a historical link between them. Now coming to the Condolite stones, this is also very, very important for your prelims. Condylite stones have been widely used in ancient Indian temple complexes, especially in eastern India. In Andhra Pradesh, Telangana and Odisha, where the condylite stones are found, they have been used in historic temples like the Konark Sun Temple, even the Jagannath Puri Temple. These historic temples have been built using the condylite stones. In modern times also, it is being used by the state government to rebuild and restore the cultural sites. That's why condylite stones are important. It is a foliated metamorphic rock, a very important point from geography. Alright, this rock or this stone is actually prone to weathering. It's not shielded from weathering. It's very prone to weathering, but still it has been used since ancient medieval times to build a number of temples, particularly in the Eastern Ghats, Vijayawada, Cuttack belt. In this belt of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh, number of temples and cultural sites have been built using the condylite stones. These stones have been named after the Kond tribe of Odisha and Andhra Pradesh, because they are found in the belt, in the tribal belt, where you find the Kond tribes as well. So here a lot of condylite mining is taking place, and during this mining process is when the Buddhist stupa was discovered. So for prelims, you should know what are condylite stones, what is its significance. You should know about the Lalitagiri Buddhist site in Odisha and the diamond triangle in Odisha. These are the basic facts you should be aware of. Next, a small topic from page number 12 related to defense. The HAL has got the approval of DGCA, the Directorate General of Civil Aviation, to commercialize the new variant of Hindustan aircraft. You can see the aircraft in the image here. It's Hindustan 228201 LW aircraft. It's a passenger commercial aircraft. It is actually a modified version of the Dornier aircraft, which is already used by the Navy, Indian Air Force and the Coast Guard for surveillance. Is that clear? Some of you might have seen the Dornier aircrafts of the Navy and the Indian Air Force. It's also used by the Indian Coast Guard. It is used for maritime reconnaissance, to carry out surveillance, to generate intelligence. The same aircraft, which is of European origin, right? The license has been procured by HAL. We domestically produce the Dorniers right now. It has been remodeled. It has been modified entirely to produce a commercial aircraft called Hindustan aircraft. It's officially called Hindustan 228201 LW aircraft. It can carry around 19 passengers. It's a lightweight aircraft, and pilots can easily get a license to fly this aircraft. And the purpose is this could help in increasing the reach of air connectivity in India. Such smaller aircrafts can be used to fly to remote locations in India. The government has ambitious plans under UDAN scheme to promote regional air connectivity. Such small commercial planes could be helpful to increase the reach, because the operational cost is very low with regard to these small commercial aircrafts. Instead of operating the bigger aircrafts, which are more expensive, right? They're not lucrative, so many airlines, they don't connect with remote rural areas. Small aircraft like these, which has a very reduced operational cost, even the pilots can easily get licenses for this, right? It's much more simpler to fly these planes. So it makes it easier to boost air connectivity with such commercial aircrafts. That is why HAL has modified the Dornier to build the Hindustan aircraft, and DGCA has granted approval for the commercialization of this new variant. Alright, so just know this fact for prelims. Next, this article is related to the Northern Ireland Protocol or the Northern Ireland Trade Pact. UK and European Union, they have agreed to start a new chapter with regard to the Northern Ireland Trade Pact. They have agreed for something called the new Windsor Framework. This is going to replace the earlier Northern Ireland Protocol, which had been agreed to between UK and European Union. This is all part of the Brexit process. Alright? It's all part of the Brexit process. Let me just explain this briefly. See, in 2016, Britain voted for Brexit, that is for the exit of Britain from European Union. Majority of the population of Britain, they voted in favor of Brexit. 52% of Britain's population, they voted for Brexit, which meant that United Kingdom is going to quit European Union. So when you're part of European Union, you have common borders. Border controls are lifted, right? There is free movement of people, free movement of goods, etc. there are no border controls when you're part of the European Union Free Trade Area. If you join their Schengen region, if you sign the Schengen Agreement of the EU, even other immigration controls are removed. You can travel to other member countries without a passport. You don't need a visa, right? Free border movement is allowed. But as far as trade within EU countries is concerned, there are no border controls. There is free movement of goods, services and investments. Now, as Britain was quitting EU, the border controls will come back, right? UK will not be eligible for free flow of goods and services. Similarly, from the other side as well. So border controls were supposed to come back. But this question started affecting Northern Ireland, which is the small territory of UK that you can see over here. This is Northern Ireland, this region here. All right. See, United Kingdom is made up of England, then Scotland and Wales and Northern Ireland. These four territories come together to form UK or Britain, right? Northern Ireland has always been problematic. I pointed this out in the previous session as well last week, that in Northern Ireland there was an insurgency going on for many decades in 1960s, 1970s, where insurgents were seeking to liberate Northern Ireland from UK. They wanted to join Republic of Ireland. People of Northern Ireland, they connect more with Republic of Ireland. This is Republic of Ireland, which is a separate country. It's a separate country and importantly, it's a EU member. Understood? So now, when insurgency was raging in Northern Ireland, Britain brought down the insurgency and negotiated with the rebels. And the insurgency was brought to an end in 1998 by signing the Good Friday Agreement. This is an agreement between UK and the Irish Republican Army, the insurgents of Northern Ireland. According to the Good Friday Agreement, insurgency was brought down, the insurgents surrendered, and in return, UK allowed for free movement between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. That is, the people of Northern Ireland who have close connections in Republic of Ireland, they have familial connections, they could freely go across. The border controls here were removed. There were no border controls because back then UK was still part of European Union, right? Republic of Ireland is part of EU and UK was also a part of EU before Brexit. So there were no harsh border controls here between Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland. So people of Ireland could cross over to Republic of Ireland on the other side without any immigration. They could even take goods and services across and bring goods from Republic of Ireland as well. Now that UK has quit, it has quit EU, the question of border control came up again. If the border control comes up here, it will be resisted by people of Northern Ireland. They don't like it. Plus, it's a breach of the Good Friday Agreement. It was promised in Good Friday Agreement that border controls will be relaxed. That is why a new protocol was needed to decide the arrangement between Northern Ireland, Republic of Ireland, and the rest of United Kingdom. How will goods move around between these territories? For that, a new protocol was needed. So previously, the Northern Ireland Protocol had been worked out, according to which goods are checked at ports in Northern Ireland on arrival from the United Kingdom and from Republic of Ireland. From here, the goods move to Republic of Ireland once they are checked. So basically, border control mechanisms had been brought back to an extent. The goods were being checked before they could be sent to Republic of Ireland, which was affecting the economic and cultural interests of Northern Ireland. So now, UK and EU have struck a new deal, the new Windsor Framework. They have agreed for the new Windsor Framework, which will replace the Northern Ireland Protocol. It's basically an upgradation of the Northern Ireland Protocol. According to the new agreement, the goods that are moving in this region will be split into two different channels. You can see the green lane here, the green lane over here. This is for goods that are destined for Northern Ireland from UK. They will not be checked. Without any border controls, goods from UK will come to Northern Ireland. But you can see the red lane here. This is EU territory. This is Republic of Ireland. So goods coming from UK to Republic of Ireland will go through the red lane where the goods will be checked. So this is the border control mechanism that UK and EU have worked out as far as the movement of goods from UK to Northern Ireland and Republic of Ireland is concerned. But between Republic of Ireland and Northern Ireland, there will be no border controls. The free movement will continue between them. Alright, so this is the complicated trade arrangement which has been brought in place through the new Windsor framework. Now coming to the last topic for today, just a heads up. On page 13, we have an important article related to Indian economy. The RBI has brought out its quarterly report, and according to the report, bank credit growth has slowed down in the third quarter of the last financial year. I just want to tell one important point here, one observation, one analytical observation. If bank credit growth is slowing down, it means the demand for loans has gone down. And this is an indicator of the growth and the economic activity in the country. Is that clear? It's a key indicator of economic activity. Similarly, if bank credit growth were to increase, it means there is more demand for loans. More people, more companies are borrowing loans. It means economic activity is going to pick up. Similarly, if credit growth is going down, it indicates a lower demand for loans, and thus it indicates lower economic activity, and it indicates a slowdown in growth in the coming months. So in the third quarter, we have noticed a slowing down of bank credit growth. It's not a complete decline, but compared to the previous quarter and the last year's quarter, there is a slowdown in the number of loans which has been given by our public and private banks. This is a reflection of the ongoing crisis in the Indian economy and the global economy. It indicates the slowdown, right? The possibility of a recession. So the number of people who are availing loans from banks has gone down, and it's an indicator of the lower economic activity in the country. All right. In prelims, there can be a basic question here. What does bank credit growth indicate? It's an indicator of economic activity, the level, the extent of economic activity in the country. All right. So just pay attention to this and take up the mains practice questions. Please write answers to these questions. Post them in the answer writing portal. The link has been given below. Don't forget, as soon as we close the session, there will be a quiz on our Telegram channel. Directly head to the Telegram channel. Take a quiz on all these topics. It will help you revise these topics and prepare better for your prelims. And also don't forget about the crash course announcement. Just subscribe to our Telegram channel, our YouTube channel, download the app. You're going to get all the details in the coming days. So that is it from my side. I hope it was a good, fruitful session. Do let me know how the session went. I'll take a look at all the comments, and do support us through your likes, your comments, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Till then, take care. Have a good day.